before we get into our talk for this evening. As far as field trips go, I think first on the calendar, Bob, did you want to mention something about the unusual waste connections, possible recycling field trip?
It's the first time we've done something that's not a birding field trip for a long time, but Audubon, nationally, is an environmental type of a group as well. And so one of the questions that I had some time ago is, I've been recycling with Waste Connection for a long time, and I always wondered, where does that stuff go? And are they really recycling it? And so my brother Bill back here made the contacts with him and set up a tour this Thursday, day after tomorrow, and we're going to be meeting up there at 11 o'clock, and there's a reason for that, because they have a lot of machinery and stuff that runs, and at 11:30 they shut it down for a lunch break. I think that's the time. And it's going to be off for about an hour, while that may make it a little easier for us to hear the tour guide. And so we're not planning, as a group, we're not planning on birding beforehand or afterwards, but anybody that goes up is welcome to do that. But we are trying to make sure that if you are going to meet us there, that you know where to meet us and when to meet us. And so I have some little reminder sheets that if you are going to join us or want to join us on Thursday, I'll give you one of these things, and it'll tell you the specifics of being there. Now, right now, I think we're looking at about 8 or 9 of us going.
It's in Hutchinson.
It's in Hutchinson. It's not in Wichita, but it's in Hutchinson. So you're going to have to try to be there at that location at 11 o'clock when we meet. So if anybody is planning on going, raise your hand, and I'll give you one of these little reminder sheets.
Are you going, Kevin?
I think so.
What are you doing?
Okay. Oh, maybe there'll be some left. If I just be
So
there.
that's Thursday of this week. Maybe if I can get out of giving a test, get somebody else to do my test. I can go.
Class field trip.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Bob.
Yep.
So in terms of Wichita Audubon, we're involved in conservation, education, and also birding, of course. So just a reminder about a couple of the birding opportunities coming up. We have our usual second Saturday bird walks. Second Saturday of every month. Meet here in the parking lot out there at 8 a.m. So that's in December. We have one on December 13th. Even though there's lots of Christmas bird counts, which you may be aware of, we're still doing our normal second Saturday bird walk as well. And then the Wichita Audubon Christmas bird count is December 20th on Saturday. And if you're interested in helping with that, contact Kevin Groneweg. Let him know you're interested and he can give you an assignment. If you look on our website on the main page, there's a list of all the events for the year. And you can find out when other Christmas bird counts are happening nearby. Even if you don't have all that much experience with birding, it's a good way to do a lot of birding and get a lot of experience real quick on that day with some experienced bird watchers. As far as field trips, I think that's all that I have to mention. Does anybody else have any other things? Or Eden Chaplain Nature Center events?
Okay, so I'm just going to share what's been going on at Chaplain. Over the weekend, we did a fall benefit, and we raised $530 that brought in, so not bad because that was only about 3 hours, so that was pretty good, and it was kind of a last minute event, so kind of only gave everybody about a 3-week notice, but saw so many families out there, families that I know have not been regulars at Chaplain. They heard about the event, they came out, they hung out in the outdoors, they had a good time. Several folks came out because they aren't normally able to get to the river, and they were able to take the hay wagon down, so that was pretty exciting to see everybody, come and hang out at Chaplain. As far as events, we also are doing a bird walk. We're doing ours the first Saturday in December, so December 6th. And then one of the next programs that I'm doing will be January 24th. It'll be an owl program and then a night owl hike. And then that's really it for now. I know most of the events Patty will be putting on the website, so definitely follow the Audubon website. If you do Facebook, follow the Facebook page because I'm very active on the Facebook page. Lots of videos and posts. I'm sure most of you know that by now. So that is all I have. Thank you.
All right. In terms of birds, anybody seen any interesting birds around lately? We've had, in addition to the normal migratory birds and winter birds arriving now, there have been a number of rare birds lately. A king eider up at Perry Lake, which is the second one ever seen in Kansas. An Arctic nesting duck, yeah. It's a female king eider, we think. So quite a few people have gone up to see that, and then just
Whistling duck at Cheyenne.
fulvous whistling duck at Cheyenne Bottoms, like a southern coastal species.
I think, I don't know how many, that may be a second or third. Maybe.
Yeah.
It's not very many.
There was a vermilion flycatcher that showed up recently down in Neosho County. So you never know what you might run into just out there looking around your local park and nature area, or your backyard even. So tonight we have Mike Clifford talking to us. Mike is the strategy director for Reverse the Red, an international coalition to halt extinctions and recover threatened species. Mike has worked as a zookeeper, working with more than 300 exotic species. In South Africa, he's worked with wild populations of mammals. He earned his master's degree in organizational development from Friends University. And he also serves as design advisor for an architecture firm based in Wichita with their specialized zoological design division. Let's welcome Mike Clifford. I was glad to meet him. Ran into him in the neighborhood and asked him to come out and give the talk. And
Yeah.
I think he's somebody we should get to know.
Cool. Thanks, Mark.
And he likes birds.
I
He
do.
was bird watching when I ran into him.
Awesome. It's great to be here. Thanks for taking the time to come and meet. Hopefully we'll talk about birds. We'll talk about species. And if anything else, I hope we talk about hope. The reason my job exists is because a whole lot of us believe that we can actually recover biodiversity. So that's ultimately why I'm here. And to talk a little bit about that. So hopefully tonight I'm going to tell a couple stories. I got a couple videos of people from around the world to tell stories via video. So we can see some stuff that's going on globally. And I'll talk a little bit about Reverse the Red as a coalition and what we do. So as Reverse the Red, we are a coalition of action. Our goal is that we can halt extinctions, reverse declines, and recover threatened species. That's essentially what we exist to do. So I want to give a little story. This is a participatory moment. Does anyone know what species this is? And if you do know, you get extra bird points. They're not worth anything, but you can feel good about yourself. Does anybody know the species?
Is that the hyacinth?
Go ahead. Close. No, it is a macaw. Did you have a hand here? Did you know?
Oh, I thought it was a hyacinth.
Nope. It's very rare, so
So
not
it's
a
a
lot of people know it. This is, sorry, just getting over to my population notes. Okay, so this is a Lear's macaw. So in about 1983, when they did the wild estimate of these, they estimated about 60 left on the planet. Not a lot. So if you don't know it or haven't seen it, there's a good reason why, right? They're pretty rare. They only lived in a couple pockets across Brazil. And so at that time, ICM Bio, which is essentially the environmental ministry of Brazil, got together and said, we've got to do something. So they put in place some actions to try to protect habitat, which worked a little bit, but it wasn't bolstering the population enough. And so in 2006, the Brazilian government actually reached out to an organization called Fundação Lobo Parque, which is a bird park in the Tenerife Islands in Spain. And they're really well known for incredible skill with breeding very rare parrots and macaws and things like that. In years before, they had actually had a successful breeding program for Spix macaws, if anybody knows of that species. And so ICM Bio for Brazil said, we're losing this species rapidly. Would you be willing to take it on and figure out how do we breed and reproduce these species, this particular species? So they said yes. So in 2006, 2 pairs of Lear's macaws out of the 60 remaining in the wild were sent to Spain. A few years later, they had built an entire protocol of how to breed and care for and rear these birds. They successfully bred 40 individuals of the Lear's macaws, which again, if you think there's only 60 left in the wild, that's a pretty big percentage. So they did that. Over time, they developed release protocols. They were able to use the rearing protocol to create an in country, so in Brazil breeding center. So the Spanish scientists and researchers that were working with the birds taught Brazilians how to do that, how to use the science, how to do the rearing, and they were able to create a captive population within Brazil as well. So over that time, they were able to successfully release and maintain at least 5 years of life for 17 more of these birds back into the wild. That's a pretty big accomplishment, right? There's stories like this all over the world. It's a matter of, can we do this at the pace and scale that we need to really recover biodiversity? But I want to start with that. Again, just a little bit of background on me. So my name is Mike Clifford. I do function as the strategy director for Reverse the Red. I'll talk a little bit more. I've called Wichita home since 2011. So I'm married to my beautiful wife, who's right here. And we have one son who's actually a student at Fringe University now. My undergraduate is in zoo science. So I started my career in conservation as a zookeeper. I moved to South Africa to work with wild populations, came back, got my master's in organization development and strategy, and have essentially worked most of my career in making change happen when change is hard. Is anybody a big fan of change? Okay, good. You're the one hand. Okay, 2 hands went up. Great. The only thing that's constant is change, right? One thing we can count on. So that's most of my career, but I did want to start because I am a fledgling birder. Yes, that was a pun. Thank you. You can laugh, it's okay. So I'm pretty new into birding. It's just been in the last year and a half or so that I've started using eBird and really going out and paying attention across Oak Park. Riverside is our home. So I feel a little insecure because there's some really incredible birders in this room. So the following pictures are just to prove that I'm trying. So about 3 weeks ago, I was lucky enough to go to Colombia. Went with a great friend of mine who is a very good birder. And we went to kilometer 18, if anybody's heard of this, near Cali, Colombia. Yeah, hand went up.
I was there about 3 weeks ago.
Really? We literally may have been there at the same time. Okay, well, we'll compare photos. Anyways, as you can attest, it's pretty spectacular. An incredible number of birds in a very small area. So between my friend Mark and I, we logged at least 120 new life species for us. So these are all his photos. I was the spotter, he was the photographer. So some amazing things. So the barbets and things and hummingbirds were awesome. The buff legs were incredible. Just phenomenal. And then this was obviously a highlight of the trip. So seeing the Indian cock of the rock for us. So very early morning and a steep walk down a real steep hill to go find it. So I'm getting into birding, so I'm really happy to be with you guys. Even though my background is rhinos and antelopes and stuff like that. So birds are much more interesting as far as behavior, but that's a different talk. Okay, so Reverse the Red. So I'm going to give you kind of a quick rundown of what is this coalition, but also go a little deeper into some of the specific activities that we engage in. So like I said, we're a coalition of action for threatened species. If you're wondering where the name came from, by show of hands, who has seen this or knows about the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species? Okay, cool. A lot of hands are going up. So if you go to Cedric County Zoo or Botanica or somewhere and you see on the signs for the species, its status, right, the threat status, that's where this comes from. This is called the IUCN Red List. So in 2021, when Reverse the Red was launched, we were named after that red list. The idea is we want to reverse the trends that are recognized through that global status. Ultimately, this is our goal. So every one of these species has been successfully downlisted or a positive movement away from the threat of extinction because of specific human action. I would assume that all of us in the room know that most of the species, they estimate about 1 million species right now are at risk of extinction. Most of that is due to human causes in one way or another. And so our effort is that we can see a change in this if we align our strategies and our efforts. And I do want to always impress the good news. It's possible. Every single species on this image here has been genuinely helped because of human intervention on behalf of these species. We have the science, the technology, the skills, the wisdom, connections, passion, resources. We have what we need. What we do need to do is coordinate better, align our work, and do it at scale and at pace. So Reverse the Red as a coalition, this makes up our executive partners. So I had a question earlier. Our team is about 20 people. 3 of us are full-time. So I'm the director of strategy and ultimately responsible for making all of our goals and things happen and steering the team. So these are some of the organizations. We were founded by the IUCN Species Survival Commission, which, another show of hands, who's familiar with the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature? Okay, great. If you're not, you should check it out. It's the largest conservation network on the planet. So it's a good one to know about. And we were also co-founded by the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So a little bit of context there. And then advisory. These names probably won't mean much to you, but what is substantial here is you can see some of the organizations. So National Geographic is a part of our advising board, World Wildlife Federation, so WWF, the panda that we're all familiar with, Disney, Bezos Earth Foundation, things like that. So we've got some really incredible people that are helping steer this strategy and making sure that we're working across the globe. And right now, Reverse the Red has about 22,000 partners in 203 countries and territories. The UN recognizes 196 countries, so I'm not sure how we got to 230. Actually, I do. It's political discourse and people not. But we're not going to talk about that now either. Okay, so gaps. These are really, all of the strategy that I'm going to talk about is designed off of these 3 things. So again, like I said, we know how to recover species, but it's a difficult thing to do. So where are the gaps? The first is alignment between government and civil society, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Essentially, what's important to know is that every single country on the planet that is part of the United Nations has agreed on something called the Global Biodiversity Framework. So it is an agreed upon plan to restore biodiversity. It's in law in almost every one of those countries, and there's funding to support it. However, you have all these NGOs and groups that are working on species that are often not aligned, and so there's big issues and big misses that we're not working together as well as we should. The second is, are we actually aimed at recovery goals and strategies and metrics? So again, we have a lot of really passionate people that do amazing things, but if you were to ask them, is your species better off because of what you're doing? Many of them don't even measure that. So there's a lot of nuance there, but it's the second thing we see. And then the third is this sense of belief and hope. So we've noticed, especially for those who are really well connected to nature, we watch biodiversity slip away, and it becomes really depressing. And I always try to tell conservationists, if you're working on a species that's declining, it's because something's not working, right? Nobody picks European starling as their, that was supposed to be funny. We should have laughed. Okay, thank you. Right, we don't pick that one as our conservation project. They're doing just fine. Maybe the other side is we need to be taking them out. But anyways, we can talk about invasive species control as much as we want. So the groups that do a lot of the work tend to be really depressed and really isolated because you're always working on something that's failing and you're always working on something that seems to be a struggle. So a lot of our work is to reinvigorate and bolster that belief and hope that we can, just like the Lear's macaw. So I think this quote really sums up a lot of what we do in Reverse the Red. This is from Sally Jewell, if anybody knows who Sally Jewell is, former US Secretary for the Interior. But it says, conservation needs to move beyond random acts of kindness and instead mobilize strategic, coordinated action, right? What I talk to people a lot about is, if you think about the companies that are out extracting value from nature, they're doing it very efficiently, they're doing it with a lot of resources, and they're doing it at scale, right? Think about strip mining. We're dealing with a bunch of stuff in Indonesia right now that's, and the Pacific Islands, where they're literally stripping entire Pacific Islands because they found precious minerals there. They're doing that very coordinated, very strategically, and very quickly. If we're going to respond on behalf of biodiversity and species, we have to do it very strategically, very quickly, and very efficiently. And we don't right now, not as well as we should. So this is the quick rundown of the strategy of Reverse the Red. Mark ensured me that you all are very smart, and so all the issues I'm having, you'll solve them tonight. You all got that memo, right? No? Okay. Just kidding. But this is, I'll give you a little bit more rundown than I usually give, just because we've got some time and this is kind of interesting stuff, hopefully. So Reverse the Red works at these three strategic levels: international, national, and local, or the species level. So the example of the Lear's macaw, that's very much a species level example. The first thing we have to do is, are these levels actually communicating back and forth? So I'll give you another example that one of the countries we were working in, just this last year, think about how much impact we could have for species when we have, you know, even $500,000 or $1 million. One country we were working with left $38 million unclaimed last year. Money that was set aside for biodiversity. That just nobody raised their hand and said, we'll do something. That's all it was. I mean, there's slightly more complications to it, but $38 million that went unclaimed on behalf of biodiversity because they weren't talking to each other, right? So that's the first thing we need to do. And then where Reverse the Red spends a lot of our time, and I'll read these because the text is kind of small, is we want to make sure we're sharing best practices, tools, and strategies, innovations, and collaborations. So where somebody has already solved a problem, don't start from scratch, right? If somebody already knows how to breed macaws, talk to that person first before you start from scratch. But a lot of that happens in our world, whether it's from the academic side or the NGO side. And then on the other one is we want to amplify success, and we want to talk about how do we learn and grow, how do we learn from failures so we don't do them again, how do we learn from successes so we do more of them, right? So we create this massive network that does a lot of this storytelling and sharing of these things. And ultimately, all of this, whether international, like the United Nations, which we work very, very closely with the United Nations, or the national or local level, all of it should be aimed at halting extinctions, reversing declines, and recovering species. So making sure that we're really clear about those things. So one of the big initiatives that we have is something called the Reverse the Red Species Pledge. So this data is a little bit old. We have more than 6,000 right now. But what that is organizations or groups that have raised their hand to say, we will commit to these actions on behalf of these threatened species. And so we start to map that all across the world and find where we have these incredible groups and organizations actively working to save species. So we developed this, and this continues to grow. Our goal is to we should have 15,000 pledges this year, and then right now there's about 50,000 species threatened with extinction. So within a year or two, we should be at that number. That's our aim, is to have 50,000 commitments of action for species. From there, I'll back up one second. So we learned a lot as we got these pledges in. And one of the things we developed was an initiative called the Accelerator Award. So the idea was we offered $15,000 for 12 months to these groups. And essentially we said, what innovations or ideas could you implement on behalf of your species within 12 months? If we gave you $15,000, right? And if you're thinking about conservation globally, things like elephants, tigers, pandas, orangutans are really complicated and really expensive. And there's a lot of money going to those places. However, if you think about Townsend shearwater in Mexico, or you think about a warbler in Kenya, or a fungi in Chile, $15,000 might be 10 times the amount of money they've ever had for that species. So even though 15,000 may not sound like a lot, in the grand scheme, it's a massive amount of money to go into some of these species. So we launched this initiative, and not only did the winners get $15,000, they also become National Geographic Explorers, which is very cool. So they get the whole Nat Geo system kind of built into what they're doing. So we sent out applications, we did a whole process, and these were the 9 winners. So we committed to having fungi, plant, and animals. If you ever think that birds get less attention than mammals, you should go talk to the fungi people. Because they don't think anybody talks to them, even though they're obviously the most fun guys. Thank you. You can't not do that one. But anyway, so yeah, the fungi people really get ignored. So anyways, we had the Loyo mushroom, which if you look it up, it's an adorable little mushroom. So it's really cool. But anyways, a few of these, like the mango tree up there, that was an extinct in the wild species. That species today does not live in the wild anymore. It only lives in a few botanic gardens and nurseries in Indonesia, I believe. So a lot of really cool projects. And one thing I wanted to do quickly is I've got 4 short little videos from the winners. just saying thanks and talking about what they're going to do with these awards. So I'm going to play these really fast. They're each about 90 seconds, so they're not long.
Hello everybody, my name is Lawrence Wabura from Kenya. Truly excited and honored having been selected as one of the 9 winners of the Reverse the Red Accelerator Grant. This is a crucial grant for us and the world as it commits to the recovery of one of the rarest bird species in the world. That is the Titan pallis, or the Pallis fucicularis. It's the bird species you see on the photo behind me, which is sadly on the brink of extinction, with fewer than 200 individuals currently making the global population. It's a species that we've been studying for quite some time now, since 2009. And I must say, it's been heartbreaking for us witnessing it gradually become locally extinct in some of these forest fragments. Well, in a nutshell, in our effort towards saving the species, we target to achieve 4 objectives in this project work. One is the expansion of the species preferred habitat. It's an effort towards achieving a sustainable habitat for a viable population. 2 is establishing habitat connectivity to enhance species dispersal and genetic exchange. Number 3, we'll be conducting population survey as part of our long-term monitoring to keep up to date with the species data, and also try to identify potential threats. And number 4, we're developing a recovery plan for the species. It's a clear roadmap to a timely recovery. Well, the team and I are truly grateful and determined to do what it takes to save the species. And again, I wish to thank the Reverse the Red for their generous support in terms of financial, technical, and even networking support. Thank you so much.
Hai, perkenalkan saya Rangi Hanata Palodan dari Perhimpunan Masyarakat Etnobiologi Indonesia. Saat ini kami sedang menjalankan sebuah inisiatif penting, yakni upaya konservasi untuk Mangifera casturi, spesies endemik Kalimantan Selatan yang kini berstatus punah di alam liar.
Mangifera casturi bukan hanya sekedar tanaman buah. Ia adalah simbol budaya, identitas lokal, dan memiliki peran ekologis yang penting bagi masyarakat Kalimantan Selatan. Namun, alih fungsi lahan dan eksploitasi berlebihan telah mengancam keberadaannya.
Tanpa upaya konservasi yang terarah dan berkelanjutan, kita tidak hanya kehilangan sebuah pohon, tetapi juga kehilangan bagian dari warisan alam dan kebanggaan kita.
Melalui proyek ini, kami menempuh 4 langkah strategis. Pertama, melakukan pembibitan melalui perbanyakan ex situ untuk menghasilkan bibit kasturi yang sehat dan siap untuk ditanam. Kedua, kami melakukan reintroduksi bibit ke habitat alaminya di Kalimantan Selatan yang telah kami pilih secara cermat. Ketiga, kami melaksanakan monitoring berkelanjutan untuk memastikan tingkat kelangsungan hidup dan pertumbuhan populasi baru. Dan yang keempat, kami menemukan kesadaran masyarakat melalui program edukasi, pelatihan, serta keterlibatan aktif.
Harapan kami, proyek ini akan menjadi pijakan awal dalam upaya mengembalikan populasi Mangifera casturi ke habitat alaminya, serta menjadi manfaat berkelanjutan bagi masyarakat sekitar.
Dengan dukungan Anda, para mitra dan pendonor, kita dapat memastikan bahwa Mangifera casturi tidak sekedar bertahan, tetapi kembali tumbuh subur dan diwariskan sebagai sumber kebanggaan bagi generasi mendatang.
Once native to freshwater springs in northern Mexico, the Potosi pupfish vanished after the springs dried up, due to an increase in agriculture to feed a growing human population. The species disappeared from the wild. Since the early 1990s, these fish have survived only in the expert care of a handful of dedicated zoos and aquariums, including ZSL. The global population is small, but it's alive. And now we have a chance to change its future by growing the population and beginning its journey home. With support from the Reverse the Red Accelerator Award, we are driving the next phase of recovery. We will use these funds to send fish and fish eggs to Mexican partner aquariums, share our skills and resources in pupfish care and breeding with our Mexican colleagues, grow the population globally to reduce extinction risk, and reconnect communities with this incredible fish species which has not been seen for nearly 30 years.
Es algo muy importante para nosotros porque lo que queremos es que se reviva esto y pues las generaciones que vienen que conozcan más que nada.
There's a lot of work to do to look at how we can deliver a framework within Mexico and ensure that the communities are at the heart of the project.
Lessons learnt will be applied to 2 other Mexican pupfish species to also support their recovery. It's a story of resilience, of partnership, and the revitalisation of a long-lost species. Because extinction doesn't have to be an end, it can be a new beginning.
En nombre del Grupo de Ecología y Conservación de Islas, quiero dar nuestro más profundo agradecimiento a Rivers de Red y de The Wild por el apoyo estratégico otorgado a través del Accelerator Amor. Este apoyo es esencial para amplificar nuestros esfuerzos de conservación para la pardela de Islas Revillagigedo, una especie clasificada como en peligro crítico debido a su pequeña y decreciente población. El principal desafío que enfrenta la pardela de Revillagigedo es la disminución de su población causada por mamíferos invasores y la degradación de su hábitat. En este sentido, nuestra estrategia a largo plazo busca eliminar estas especies invasoras, restaurar los hábitats de su anidación y aumentar la supervivencia de sus pollos. El proyecto financiado por el Accelerator Award es un paso fundamental enfocado en la isla Clarion. Nuestro objetivo principal es aumentar el número de polluelos producidos por pareja reproductiva y así mejorar su éxito reproductivo. Esperamos que estas acciones aumenten el área de ocupación, mejoren la calidad del hábitat y contribuyan al crecimiento de la población e impulsar el reclutamiento de sus juveniles. Este trabajo es clave para prevenir la extinción y a futuro contribuir a la reclasificación de esta especie dentro de la lista roja.
So these are just 4 of the winners to give you a sense of kind of the work that's going on. Something else that's really important to us, and I appreciate it, is we always ask people to present in whatever their primary preferred language is. Since we work in so many places across the country, or excuse me, across the world, that's something that's really important to us. So thanks for dealing with the subtitles. So again, we had 9. What else was incredible about this program? So not only, that last one, the Townsend Shearwater, all that work that's going to go in for that bird species in Mexico. In the next 12 months, the first time in 30 years, the Mexican pupfish will be back in Mexico. I mean, there's really cool stuff happening. And what you can also see is that in every one of these, there's a dozen partners that have to work together to make this happen. There's universities doing research, there's science, there's the governments, there's all sorts of NGOs and stuff that have to come together. And that's really at the heart of what we're trying to do, is how do we all pull together, share our knowledge, our wisdom, our resources, and do this faster and better. There were 44 finalists. We had selected the 9, but we also had 240 initial applications. And every one of those 240 applicants that came from all over the world received strategy support, learned and were provided some training on how to do recovery planning and all sorts of things. So really the design is that all 240 received a lot of support and help, not just the 9 winners. But then what we'll be able to do is over the course of this year, again in a partnership with National Geographic, is that we'll give regular updates on all of these projects. Because the thing I can tell you is that everything they have in their plan won't work perfectly. We know that, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And one of the things that I hear often from conservationists that actually really frustrates me is things like the species pledge. I've heard conservationists say, well, I'm not willing to make the pledge because I can't guarantee that I can save the species. And my response is, well, if we don't do anything, we can guarantee what will happen. We've got to try, right? That's kind of where we're at. So that's the species level. I would also say if anybody's thinking like how to get involved with reverse threat stuff, the species level is the best place. So if you or anyone you know is actively doing actions for threatened species, anyway, it could be locally or globally, making a species pledge is a great thing. We also are always looking for funding and stuff to go to these projects, so there's ways that we can help. So I'll go kind of fast through the last couple things here. Moving into the middle of that pyramid, the national level. So this is the less glamorous stuff, but it's really critical stuff. Is I mentioned earlier, 196 countries have agreed to this thing called the Global Biodiversity Framework. It has a series of goals for the year 2050, and it has a series of targets for the year 2030. By show of hands, has anybody heard of an initiative called 30 by 30? Nobody? Okay, great. You heard of Reverse the Red, that's bad. Just kidding. So 30 by 30 is an initiative to protect 30% of the world's land and 30% of the world's oceans for species, or for biodiversity. It's gotten a lot of traction. There's a lot of really good stuff with that. One of the things that we know scientifically, though, is 57% of known species are still at risk of extinction, even if we still hit that 30% number. So it's species that their populations are too small, they're crashing, genetic bottlenecking, something. So that's what created Target 4. Target 4 is specifically about species and those species that require additional actions. So what we've been doing is we've been developing these national specialist groups. So these are networks of volunteers and taxonomic experts all around the world that work at the country level. So they're working hand in hand with those national governments to provide advice and to build the strategy for a national recovery effort. What's interesting, I don't know how many people work with governments often or work with governments at all, whether it's local or a national level, but in some of the countries that we're working in, the entire environmental ministry may be less than 3 people. So that means that those 3 people have to do everything from renewable energies, national parks, invasive species, threatened species, marine protected areas, like boat and fuel regulations. I mean, it's just crazy some of the stuff that they have to do. So if you go to those 3 people and say, we need you to create a national strategy to save species, they don't have time. They can't. They also don't have the expertise usually. So we're building this entire network and support to be able to solve a lot of those problems for the countries that are asking for that help. So we've already made a lot of traction in just a couple of years. Our goal is that we should have 30 to 50 countries with an active national plan here in the next probably in the next 2 to 3 years. I mentioned earlier one of the countries that left $38 million on the table unclaimed for biodiversity. This is one of the ways that we're solving that problem. We can't access that kind of money, which is available, but we can't access it if we don't have a plan. If it's just one organization at a time, everyone's asking for $20,000 or $50,000, we can't access that kind of funding. But if we have a cohesive national plan, we can. And so we're working on a lot of that and pulling those levers and getting some really influential people to push on other people to make these things happen. And so the last little piece I'll put in here, again, what we find is that so many countries, when they think of species recovery, they're very overwhelmed. The government staff really don't know how to tackle this, and they think that we have to save every single species that lives in that country, and that's not quite accurate. And so I'll walk through this really quickly. So if you pick an individual country, let's just say Fiji. Well, we're doing a lot of work in Fiji right now. If anybody wants to come with me and go scuba diving next summer or look for birds, let me know. No hands?
Me.
Okay, I was like, that seemed like a good invitation. All right. Yes, Sarah and I will be going. So imagine all the species in Fiji, right? So we've got maybe close to 3,000 or so in Fiji. A percentage of those have been assessed on the red list, so we actually know the status of those species. Out of that, a percentage of them are threatened. So we can narrow this down. From there, a lot of the species, really what they need is protected areas. We just need to protect a certain habitat and a space. They'll be okay if we can just do that. That's their primary threat, right? But there's a whole other set of species that they need something else. So like the Lear's macaw, there's just not enough of them. You could protect their habitat, but there's only 60, right? So you need something else. So that's what falls into target 4, and that's the species that we can make a rapid improvement on with these good recovery strategies. And so that's where we start to map the species pledges, that big map earlier. So we can look at which species need the action, who's working on the action, and ultimately then, where's the gap? It's really a simple gap analysis is what it is. But in Fiji, to give you an example, so that needing additional urgent action, that list is about 600 species in Fiji. Those are primarily species that are endemic to Fiji, they don't live anywhere else, right? Small populations, things like that. So with that number of about 600, and right now, with the species pledges that we have for Fiji, we may already be 30 or 40% to that target, to having action in place for those 600 species. Then what that means is we know which species need action and we can start to mobilize. So another example of this, does anybody know the crested iguanas or banded iguanas from Fiji? I was like, Jim, I know you know. Yeah, a couple others, right? So crested iguanas you see often in zoos and things around the world. We have really successful breeding programs. They are threatened, but Fijian banded iguanas are incredibly threatened. There's a very small number left. They only live in a few places. We really don't even know how many of them are alive. So the idea is we can go to the zoos and aquariums that have really successful breeding programs for crested iguanas and say, would you be willing to do the science and the research to figure out how to reproduce banded iguanas? Or I like to say humorously, make us 100 iguanas, right? Just make us iguanas. Figure that out, put on some Barry Manilow and let it happen, whatever. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing at that national level. It's unlocking strategy, it's unlocking major funding, but it's really starting to mobilize. And part of why I was in Colombia a couple weeks ago was to meet with their national government to develop all these things. So what I can say is it's working. It's not glamorous work. It's a lot of boring meetings and sending emails and things like that, but it's the stuff that's gonna unlock potential for long term. So then the last thing that I'll talk about is the top of the pyramid, so the international level. How do we get the word out that species recovery is possible, that we should do it? So in 2024, we launched the first ever World Species Congress. What this was a 24-hour event. It started with the sunrise in New Zealand and literally followed the sun around the globe. And it had completely unique content, fully virtual. The presenters could speak in whatever their native language was, and it was live translated through AI to 11 other languages around the world. It was incredible. It was positive stories. It was stories of hope and success and amazing conversations. Jane Goodall actually opened it for us, which was a great honor. And so phenomenal event. So we had, our estimate was about 110,000 people from 200 plus countries that attended and participated. You can see some of the stats there. That's all on YouTube. If you have a free weekend and you want to stay up for 24 hours, you can do that. I slept for about 4 hours maybe that day. My colleague did not sleep at all. I didn't force her to do that. She just chose to do that on her own. The other thing that happened was there was about 100 satellite events that happened all around the world. This one was really cool because in Indonesia, they actually created their own entire conference that happened in parallel with the World Species Congress. So we simulcasted it at one point and they had this amazing conversation all in, I actually don't know what language they speak in Indonesia, so in that language. Amazing work that happened. We had, on this day, the British Parliament actually had a debate over species recovery. So that was taking place. Spain had a huge event. It was this massive thing across Brazil. South Africa did a whole 12-hour conference itself on South African species and what it'll take. So it was this major moment in species conservation. And then every year we have something called Reverse the Red Day. This is coming up in February. Anybody can always join. We have online programming. It's not as complex as the World Species Congress, so you don't have to stay awake for 24 hours. But we highlight a lot of amazing stories. Again, there's satellite events all around the world. That image on the top left is actually the Chicago zoos, aquariums, botanic gardens, and arboretums all came together and made a collective pledge to save and recover species, both locally and internationally. So they were actually on their local news talking about all this stuff in Chicago. So some really cool things that take place with this. Yeah, so that's kind of the top of the level. So coming back to it, reverse the red, so we are a coalition of action for species. From the deepest part of my core, I believe that it's possible to reverse biodiversity loss. I think we have the skills and the techniques and tools and everything we need to do it, but we need to do it faster and we need to do it at scale. And so that's why we exist. So from the back of my garage in Riverside, this is the work that I do each day. I have windows and bird feeders, so they keep me company, and our backyard chickens. So this is the work. I hope we'll do some Q&A and things if you have questions. This is a little bit of a deeper dive on everything we do, because hopefully it's just of interest. But that's ultimately it. We need to mobilize as many people that know how to save species as possible, and we need to do it really fast, and that's what we're after. So last thing I'll leave you with, because I know that each one of you plays a part in this, so thank you for being a part of this story. And I genuinely believe that we can change, excuse me, we can change the course of history for species. It's possible. We're the reason it's going this direction, so we're also the reason we can change the direction. So with that, that's all I have, and yeah, thanks. Questions? Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. There's a question here.
I just was unclear about what the pledge was.
Yes. So the pledge is for any organizations or groups that are actively doing work to save species or help recover species. So it's organizations that commit to specific actions for a specific species in certain countries.
So it's at the organization level, it's not individuals, or it's, because it's, yeah, okay.
We do have individuals that make it, because in a lot of places in the world, organizations as we know them don't exist. So we do have a number of them that are, one person that's just trying to save something somewhere. So we do have some of those. Generally from the global north, it tends to be organizations, or again, honestly, like we actually have a number of Audubon chapters and stuff that have made it. BirdLife, if anybody's familiar with BirdLife, we have a ton of pledges from BirdLife organizations and partners. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
What's going on in the U.S.? What sort of buy-in do you get in this country?
We're out of time. Okay. Just kidding. This actually comes up a lot, because obviously the current administration is not super environmentally friendly, at least from what we see. So one of the issues that I often hear, so I was mentioning the Global Biodiversity Framework through the UN. So there's only 3 countries on the planet that have not ratified the Global Biodiversity Framework. It's the Vatican, North Korea, and us. It's not the greatest company. Vatican doesn't ratify anything, just so you know. So they're like a default excuse as to why they don't get to do that. But that's the scenario. What that doesn't mean is that the US has thrown out all of its efforts for biodiversity. That's not the case. The US helped to write those. We do agree to them. We do support them financially, not as much as we were, but we are involved. So there's still a lot of work there. One of the other things that's really unique about the US, as well as a lot of the well-developed countries, so Canada, most of Europe, Australia, a few other, China, Japan, there's a trend that the more resources are available, the more bureaucratic the work gets. And so it's actually really difficult to get a lot of collective work done in the US at the federal level. Where we do see a lot of work is at the state level. So right now I was mentioning this kind of national strategy that we're doing, and we have 5 pilot countries and regions right now, but in the US we actually have 3 states that have come to us and said, we would like to do this recovery strategy at a state level. And we said, that's fine. We're actually, one of them is, don't say anything when I told you this is all confidential. I can trust every one of you, right? Okay, great. Dallas County is one that's looking at doing it. And the reality is Dallas County is bigger than like 20% of the countries on the planet. So the same strategy and principle can apply at whatever scale, but particularly in the US, it's much better right now to go at the state or localized level than it is to try to operate federally. Yeah, great question. You go here and I'll come over.
Are there any initiatives happening in the Wichita area, South Central Kansas, statewide?
I know that there are a couple, so I sadly don't spend a lot of my time here mentally. I live here, but so I know of, there's been some really good projects on ornate box turtles that have gone on. Actually, the Topeka Zoo and the Hutchinson Zoo have been part of leading that initiative and that program, which has had a lot of success. One of the things they were able to do is, with all their research, was actually to reduce the legal take limit of those turtles. I can't remember what the numbers were, but I remember hearing what was legally allowed per day, and it was shocking how many turtles somebody could take in a day. So that work is really good. The other thing that I know a few of you know about, it's more of an area-based project, but there's a lot of discussion going on right now about creating a grassland restoration on the parking lot across from the Indian Museum. And so I've been a part of that conversation to try to get that going. And there's been progress on that discussion as well, and a lot of city support. So I know of a few things there that are going on.
I know, like, this is focused on species survival, but I'm wondering, you may or may not have any information on this or thoughts, but how much does war and overconsumption, tackling those things, have effect down the line? Those two just seem to me to be the massive things that cause this in the first place.
Yeah. Wow, just going there. I like it. Wouldn't expect anything less from my friend. Yeah, it is a huge thing. The way we look at it, because overconsumption is massive. I mean, the reason we're losing most of our biodiversity is because the extraction of value out of nature. That's hands down, and you can trace it back, whether it's, oil's an easy one to pick on, it's earned it, but so is mining. We all struggle with electric things are better probably, but yet what we're doing to get the batteries to get to those electric things is really damaging to nature. So I think we do have to reconcile consumption globally as humanity. I don't think there's any way around that conversation. Sorry, the battery might be dying on us, but so we do talk about that a lot. I don't know the answer to that question. It's definitely a complicated one. The war element. So I know as far as where we've talked about it is, we have right now a list of about 50 plus countries who've requested our help to come in with developing these strategies and doing this work. We did a mapping exercise looking at every country on the planet, and essentially if a country has high capacity like the US or Canada or Europe, they're not a target for us because they probably have the people they need to do it. Conversely, somewhere like Colombia or Nigeria, Seychelles, something like that, high biodiverse, low resource, low capacity, those are our targets. However, the low end of our list looks at countries that have unstable governments, because there is just a reality to, if there's not an infrastructure to be able to handle it, primarily through government, our work is very unlikely to stick. And so war comes up a lot in that. Try this. Okay. So yeah, war comes up a lot in that. If I could figure out how we stop war, that'd be a good thing. But yeah, it does have a massive impact. And then there's weird stuff too, just thinking on the bright side. If anybody's seen the documentaries of like post-Chernobyl, these weird things where nature comes back in these fascinating ways. Maybe with an additional eye, we'll figure that out. But right, it is a fascinating thing to see when we stop kind of imposing overabundant human will on nature. It actually works pretty well. So That's really not an answer to your question, but some thoughts. Yeah, question.
Invasive species, is that generated by man's interventions, or and how do we change that? I mean, I read about the owls, and I thought,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, gotta kill all those owls, you know. So,
Yeah, fascinating conversation because, so in many instances, invasive species is a human cause, right? We know that. Again, starlings, we can talk about that. Sparrows, we can talk about that. In a lot of the Pacific Islands, the biggest issues we have is rats, cats, snakes, over and over, right? Now, if you go into the plant world, whole different thing, because we've been putting in invasive species for a long time, and then we wonder why all of our natives are, slowly getting worked out. So for the clear ones that are human driven, I think it's our responsibility to do the best to remedy that. It is complicated. Now, where there's other layers, and this is really fun, so I'm a strategist by training with a biology background, but when you get in a room with a bunch of conservationists, it's really fascinating what they fight about. So one of them is this conversation, is our goal to preserve what used to be, or is it to work with the adaptive realities of nature? And I'm not sure which one's the right answer, to be honest. I do know that nature's gonna keep changing. So to try to hold this view that it has to be what it was at some defined moment in history, which again, any human history is gonna be a very limited scope compared to nature's history on any of these spaces. So that's really fascinating because, again, like the owl story, and there's many like this, where naturally species have kind of gone away. Maybe there's been some human interference, but you now have competition between different species, and how do we handle it? Let me throw you one even weirder example. So there's something going on in Australia right now with the quoll. Does anybody know what a quoll is? A couple of you? Okay, if you don't, Google it, they're adorable. They're really cute little Australian marsupials. So they evolved in a space and in a habitat that did not have cane toads. Cane toads are large toads that are poisonous, right? So they're toxic when you eat them. Quolls don't know that, and quolls don't have any resistance to that. So they eat them and they die. So you have this massive tank of the population of quolls. Now, here's where we get really weird stuff about invasive species. So there's a group of scientists that are using gene splicing technologies. So not any different than like corn that's resistant to certain pesticides or things. But what they're able to do, and they're testing this now, is that they can reproduce cane toads that are no longer toxic. They've isolated the gene that creates that toxicity, so they can do that. They can also upscale the genes that they're more prolific than the non-genetically altered cane toads. The idea, yeah, right, we're like Jurassic Park style stuff here. This is real, like this is happening right now. So they can do this alteration with the idea that you put them back out, they reproduce with the other cane toads, right? Barry Manilow, back there. That should have got a better laugh. That's okay, it's late. So, anyways, you put them back out, they reproduce, you start to shift the genetic code of all of the cane toads, quolls can eat them. The great news, the way they're thinking is quolls already want to eat them, and we want them gone. So just make them not toxic and let the quolls take care of the invasive species. What do you think about that? So, I mean, I throw it in to just say it's really complicated. How we manage this stuff is really difficult. And for me as a strategist, my goal is that species are better off tomorrow than they are today. Every species is threatened. We should be working to improve that. And I would say every tool we have should at least be entertained. And one of the things that was interesting, I'll throw one other last little nugget. So I was referencing the IUCN earlier, International Union for Conservation of Nature. So what's really important is that network essentially agrees upon a set of scientific standards that most countries adopt. And then when they adopt that, it influences legal status or legislation. So there was a discussion at this last IUCN Congress in October that a bunch of conservationists wanted to table the discussion on synthetic biology, what that would mean is that we're not even gonna talk about it. We're gonna turn a blind eye and not have this conversation. Where others said, we have to talk about it because it's happening. And if the scientific community doesn't put their foot in and say, this is good science, this is good ethics, these companies developing the technology are gonna do it anyways. That vote only passed, it was 51 to 49. So it only barely passed that the IUCN did put forth their studies and recommendations on the ethics for synthetic biology. So it's really, really interesting seeing this battle happening within the scientific community. So anyway, sorry, side note. Great question. Any others? No? Oh, one more.
What is your absolute favorite species that's on the red list?
That's on the red list. On the red list, I'm really partial to black rhinos. So they're currently endangered. Most of my work was with black rhinos, particularly when I was in Africa. So if I was fortunate enough in my career, I've worked with 4 out of the 5 species of rhinos that are still alive on the planet. I think black rhinos have the most personality. If you know white rhinos, they're basically big cows. They really don't, they just walk around and eat grass and, they'll get angry every once in a while. But black rhinos, every one of them has a totally different personality. They're super fun. I worked with one named Onyx that I worked at a place in Florida, so they're big, if you didn't know this. They're quite large, so 3,000-ish, 3,000 to 4,000 pounds, maybe a little smaller. But she would stick her head across the walkway, and so that I couldn't pass because their head is, this big. And so she would wait until I fed her a pine cone, and then she would. So Onyx was really sweet. There was another black rhino named Tom who was the meanest Napoleon you'd ever met. This tiny little guy. I think he was just upset about that. So he would try to flip the truck and try to pierce the tires and come flying at you before the gate was closed and stuff like that. So Tom was kind of a pill, but personality. So probably black rhinos. They're quite special. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate the attention and let me dive into some stuff.